So, signs today that the fragile recovery may be taking root. The economy grew by 0.8% in the 3 months to September. That's the third successive quarter of growth and the fastest rate since the coalition came to power. After 3 years of flatlining, the Chancellor was delighted and deployed a new catchphrase. But as our economics editor Faisal Islam reports from Leeds, the stats are not being felt by everyone.
Meticulous precision engineering and a sign of precious economic momentum. Surgical innovations in Leeds are, well, innovating the equipment required all around the world for advanced keyhole surgery. Sales are up, exports are up, and this former false nail factory now turning out advanced manufacturing since the recession trebling its workforce and after help from government growth funds set to treble again. Fear not, this is not your correspondent actually performing a keyhole operation. In fact, it's George Osborne that might fancy himself as a microsurgeon of the economy, not just because of cuts, but because of the radical innovations he's made under Mark Carney to monetary policy. That's brought about a first under Chancellor Osborne, which is consecutive quarters of reasonable economic growth. The first, in fact, for 6 years. That means one word: momentum, for the first time under Chancellor Osborne. Momentum that can only be sustained if growth spreads, not just from the service sector, but towards the manufacturers and exporters of equipment just like this. And while boss Graham Bowland does see that momentum, he fears continued imbalances.
I think we're seeing some confidence return. I'm sceptical there's a rebalancing in the economy at the moment, certainly in terms of manufacturing. Manufacturing companies that I know in the region are still struggling to survive. Where the manufacturing companies are succeeding are those companies that are adding value to the manufacturing process.
The Chancellor has been rather accustomed to the odd yarn and spin, explaining away 3 years of flat economic growth. But visiting a textile factory in Leeds, today's numbers are now firmly on his side.
Britain's hard work is paying off and we're on the path to prosperity. Of course, lots of risks remain out there in the world economy, but I think there is now real momentum in the British economy, and that's thanks to our economic plan.
Here's why he thinks that. In spring 2010, as the coalition was forming, the economy grew by 1% in just 1 quarter. Since then, growth has risen and fallen frustratingly from quarter to quarter until today's figure of 0.8%, the highest since the election. But significantly, it's finally 2 straight quarters of solid growth, a sign of momentum finally building. A new shopping centre in Leeds might not typify the cost of living crisis, even across Yorkshire, but there are signs of economic momentum amongst consumers, even here. And that's good news for Mark Carney and George Osborne. It might just be that their promises of lower interest rates for longer have cut through, not just to businesses, but also to consumers on the high street.
When you come somewhere like this, it feels like in the last few months it's sort of changing you.
Well, all I can say is, and we noted where we lived yesterday, recently there's quite a few houses gone sold that have been on the market quite a long time. So somebody somewhere must have some money again.
Are people feeling a bit more flush? House prices going up? Is it beginning to turn a bit?
I think definitely in our industry there's a turn, but there's a lack of skilled workers in the construction, definitely. So no, I think he's totally out of touch with what's going on.
One local MP at the shopping centre, also Shadow Chancellor, is still sceptical.
As the Governor of the Bank of England said yesterday, from a very low base, we're finally getting growth. I think that George Osborne made a terrible mistake in choking off the recovery. We've had 3 damaging years and we're paying the price in falling living standards and long-term unemployment and a much higher deficit than we need.
From Leeds, a city with a strong, diversified service economy, the picture does look brighter. But how deep-rooted and sustainable is this recovery? The growth today was overwhelmingly in the service sector, and back at the factory, the Chancellor is pondering what to do on living standards.
This growth means nothing if it's not spread around to the people.
Well, jobs are being created. I mean, that's the most tangible improvement in anyone's living standards you can have. And what you see is more and more people coming into work, people coming off unemployment. Now, of course, you can't have an improvement in living standards if you don't have an improvement in the national economy. But you are now seeing that improvement in the national economy being delivered by our economic plan.
Growth this year is set to be double the official predictions made only at this year's budget, so more good news around the corner for the Chancellor. But the fabric of Britain's imbalanced economy is yet to show much change.
Well, of course, large areas of Britain still suffer stubbornly from benefit dependency. And in a moment, our social affairs editor, Jackie Long, will report on the people struggling as the government cuts the benefits bill. First, our economics editor, Faisal Islam, is with me, just off the train from Leeds. And the temptation for a lot of sceptics is going to say, well, 0.8%, that's nothing, it doesn't affect me.
I'd say this is pretty much the ideal number for the Chancellor. It's kind of like a Goldilocks number, neither too hot nor too cold, because had it been much less, they'd have said this is a weak recovery. Had it been a lot stronger, and some people predicted it being a lot stronger, over 1%, 1.2%, people would have said that Osborne's stoking up a bubble. But yes, it's true that the issue about living standard remains, and that's because it is a very real issue, and that's because on average wages are not rising in line with prices, and that's been true since since before the coalition came in, but it's been true the whole length of the coalition, and it continues, of course, with the rising energy prices, and that's created the problem responding to Ed Miliband's gambit on the price freeze.
And that's what they've been obsessing about this week, and the Prime Minister has said George Osborne's going to do something to cut green levies. I mean, did he give you any hints?
So not just this week, there's been kind of meetings of the Quad trying to bash this out. They've obviously really trying to think of a response to this, and for good reason, because they know that this issue of growth not spreading to everybody is cutting through. So I did put to the Chancellor, when I saw him in Leeds earlier, I put to him the notion that he was pondering a windfall tax, and this is what he had to say.
Well, look, that's not part of our plans. I mean, a Chancellor doesn't do his budget on Channel 4 News or anywhere else. But it's not been part of our plans, and we have set out our approach to dealing with energy bills. And ultimately what I want is lower taxes to deliver an improvement for people in their household energy bills. And you can only have that if you have a growing economy and a proper plan to deal with your public finances.
So not entirely a denial on that windfall tax suggestion which came out of an interview with John Major earlier, but he obviously prefers to deal with this issue through the issue of green obligations to companies. That then raises a whole different set of issues about the government that promised itself to be the greenest government ever, and some issues within the coalition too.